Afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
Today we have a special invited guest. This is our very first time of having a guest, so I'm super excited. We have Richard Douglas joining us today. I'm going to read his bio, and I'm hoping that you all will throw your questions out there. Everything accessibility is today's topic. We want you all to walk away understanding at the highest level the importance of accessibility, what are some strategies, and when you need to call in an expert. All right, so before we get started, let me read Richard's bio and then we'll jump in. So, Richard is a user experience researcher, and for over 20 years, he's helped create engaging experiences for companies such as Razorfish, IBM, and PwC. For dozens for a dozen years, Richard has assisted clients with accessibility research via multiple methodologies, including expert reviews, individual interviews, and contextual inquiries. In addition, Richard has led workshops. He is worldwide. He has led workshops at conferences in China, New Zealand, and here in the United States. So, with all of that, Richard, let's before we get started and jump into things, love for you to share a few words with us and with the audience, and then we'll kind of get those questions going.
Sure. No, thank you for having me. Yeah, I've been involved in the work for quite a while. Noticed sort of a change in how clients are dealing with accessibility. Um, back, it was probably in the early 2000s was when I first was working for somebody that was approached about some violations they had on their website. And at that time, it was common for a nonprofit such as National Federation for the Blind to basically write up 10 bullet points or so and say, hey, fix your stuff.
Mm-hmm,
You got 30
mm-hmm,
days to write me a short description of how you're going to deal with this. And they didn't want money. They just wanted you to fix your stuff. They wanted it to be accessible for as many people as possible.
mm-hmm,
So it was kind of like that tone of things. And I'd say over the last 10 years or so, it's become much more aggressive. There are individual law firms that hire people to scan public facing websites and they send demand letters.
Oh,
And they
wow.
don't really care if you fix your stuff or not, they just want paid.
Wow.
So if you get
Wow.
one of these, it's a whole different animal. And so there's a number of big consulting firms. They tend to be located around the DC area because
Mm-hmm,
government and universities were held accountable for this kind of thing much earlier than private companies.
mm-hmm,
And they're all very busy and they'll help you if you get in trouble or if you want to be proactive. And the work that I do helps supplement sort of like an overall plan that um, IT organizations in particular
mm-hmm.
need to be accountable for as they're creating new digital assets, whether they're websites or kiosks or mobile apps. They have to promise that everything will be as thoroughly reviewed and as thoroughly compliant as possible. So the work that I do helps play a part in that.
Wow. So, what I'm hearing is things have evolved to where the accountability is more, there's more rigor around accountability, and there are also penalties for not
Oh yeah.
being
Oh
accountable.
yeah.
And I can remember years ago, there was an article about Target and their website, and then they were fined a significant amount of money. You
Yep.
know which situation I'm talking about.
Yeah, that was one of the more famous ones. That was around 2008. They actually decided to fight it, and they got a
Mm,
really big black eye out of it. They were featured in the New York Times, a whole bunch of other publications, and like, hey, it gave them a lot of really bad PR. And essentially, what it boiled down to was they were offering prices and specials online that they weren't offering in the store. And their site was inaccessible to folks that had visual impairments that were using assistive technology. So it was an easy, hey, you're in the wrong here. So most companies now settle,
mhm,
and most of the settlements entail coming up with that overall plan of how you're going to deal with anything that you develop new from here on out,
mhm,
hiring staff, um, looking at things like conducting the type of research that I'm conducting, like to make sure that things are as accessible as they can be, those sorts of things. So,
So
no,
let's talk about that plan. I think you alluded to the
Yeah.
fact that IT can develop that plan, that you might work from that plan. What does that look like?
am I able to share my screen? Can you make me a
You
presenter,
can.
or how does that work?
I think you can. That's a good question.
Curveball.
You should be able to, yep, you should be able to share your screen, but if you can talk through it while you look for it, that would be great.
Oh, here we go. All right.
Oh, you got it? Okay.
Let's see.
And folks out there, while Richard's getting the information together, feel free to throw your questions out there so that
There
they
we go.
can come through.
Alrighty. Are you able to see my screen?
I'm not. No, we're not.
No, I'm not.
No, not yet. All right.
No.
We'll try it
Yeah, we
again.
may have to just talk through it if you
Yeah.
can.
Okay,
Is
no
that
worries. Yeah, so there was a case back around 2014 where Peapod got in trouble, and they decided to settle. Actually, it was the federal government that sued them, DOJ,
Hmm.
and they settled. And essentially, they're agreeing to, and these agreements and the settlements all tend to look the same. They have to agree to abide by the latest WCAG standards. WCAG stands for Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. They're sort of like the benchmark or the watermark that
Hmm.
everybody's held accountable to. And so there's A, AA, and AAA compliance. Not every standard has all three of those levels. I have a hard time explaining that to clients. You can't be AAA on everything. Some of them are just a checkbox, and you either get AA or single A, and you're good. But anyway, you have to be compliant to the latest version of those. You need to solicit feedback from customers with disabilities. That's where I come in. You have to contract for and perform third-party evaluation and consultation. So bring in one of these consulting firms to help you. And you have to perform regular automated conformance testing. So there's code scanning tools out there that can do some of this work for you. There's a lot of work being done around that to make it more streamlined. There's a training component to it, and you need to try to fix anything that's been called out in the lawsuit in 30 days, or come up with a plan for how you're gonna handle it. So yeah, you're basically sent to the penalty box. You're told not to do it again, and anything from here on out has to be as compliant as possible. So
And
that
what?
that
Go
I'm
ahead,
sorry, go ahead.
Rick. Oh no,
That just
I was just gonna ask. No, finish.
no, that's just that template that I just told you.
Mm-hmm.
That you lather, rinse, and repeat. Just about every accessibility settlement is in that, has that same group of things that they have to do.
And what are some of the biggest violations? So I know you have a strong focus on accessibility, especially with whatever is in
Yeah.
development. What are some of the got yous you're seeing a lot out there?
Well, some of my clients ask me to do more of an awareness piece. So that's, understandable. They're just trying to get everybody leveled up a little bit. And so a number of the studies that I do feature video clips because they want to build empathy amongst people throughout the company. So in many cases, the type of work that I do, the video clips are a lot of times even more important than the final report, because they want to use that to demonstrate to whomever that they need to convince that this is really important. And so most companies are aware of these scanning tools. Most of the IT folks have some level of understanding of accessibility that varies. Where I come in is not only to help ensure that what you've tried to fix is compliant as possible, but I also try to highlight things that would make a positive experience for people in these audiences. So it's kind of going beyond the level of compliance. Like, how do we make a really positive user experience for everybody that comes in and uses your site or your mobile app or whatever it might be? So, and those things tend to need to be caught by working individually with people one-on-one with their assistive technology, with whatever the item is that they need to work with. It's really hard to catch those by just doing a code scan or something like that.
Mhm. And with testing, so I think Kenya and I, we had a recent project where it was eye opening for, we're always aware of accessibility. We'll kind of consider it as part of our heuristic evaluation when we do that.
Mm-hmm.
But it was still shocking. So we had some usability testing we did, and it's a client, not naming it, but I think it's very common. And we ended up with a participant who was blind. So it was truly eye opening, watching this person perform these tasks. That we discovered all kinds of violations of, the accessibility standards. Is that
Okay.
something you recommend to people? For instance, bringing in those people with those challenges to do the testing, and if so, how hard is it to get to the right people? I mean,
Oh,
it was by chance we ended up with someone with a disability,
mm-hmm.
and accessibility ended up being the complete focus of that test because the site was so broken that most of the tasks couldn't even be performed. But I'm just curious how you try to engage that user base, or if you
Yeah.
struggle with it.
No, those are great questions. Typically, if you bring folks in that are using screen readers, the screen reader itself will just be reading the code on, say, a website. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to bring those folks in if you have a prototype. If you've ever looked under the hood of what's behind a Figma prototype or one of the popular tools, it's a bird's nest, and it doesn't accurately reflect what will be out in production. So if you have production level or near production level code, that's when it makes sense to bring these folks in. However, I have experimented with methodology earlier this year where the moderator mimicked what the screen reader would read
Oh,
using
interesting.
screenshots. So basically pretending you're a screen reader.
Okay. Oh, that's really interesting. So where you could still
Yeah.
engage with that base, even though it's a prototype.
Yeah,
Interesting.
the client was for financial services, and they were very concerned about the credit card application flow.
Mhm.
And they had some instances where they were using some newer technology. I don't know if you've had a chance to try this out, but where you instead of typing in your 16-digit credit card number, which is always one of the most pleasant experiences when you sign up and enroll, you can use your phone, and it'll use optical recognition and try to populate that field for you. So, whether or not someone could actually do that if they were using a screen reader, or whether they were low vision and using screen magnification, that was a key concern for them. So for the folks with screen readers, we were doing our best to try to mimic what a screen reader would do. And with that, we're trying to mimic areas of focus, because that tends to be a big problem that pops up, or common problem that pops up, is where is the initial focus on the screen? Is it where the person should start? Is it somewhere completely out of field that'll confuse them?
Yeah, yeah.
Because they can't, if they're using a screen reader, they can't visually see the screen to be able to use their mouse to get up where they're supposed to be. So sometimes that doesn't come out until you actually bring someone in that has a screen reader. And as far as the recruiting question goes, as you know, one of the worst parts of user research is recruiting. And if you've ever done it yourself, you never want to do it again if you don't have to. But if you do have to recruit your own, I've made friends with people in my local community. I live near the state capital of my state, so we have a school for the blind in my city. So I've introduced myself and made friends there, recruited staff members, and they've helped me identify people in town that use assistive technology. There's also nonprofits that help people in many towns get government benefits to be able to afford the assistive technology. And they usually have a job placement type of component as well. There's an incredibly high unemployment rate, particularly with people that have visual impairments. I've heard upwards of 40 or 50%. So it's a constant need. They can help you identify it. And then I also have a large state university in my town as well. And a lot of these universities are well equipped with staff, labs, assistive technology, even courses for people that have some sort of challenge to help them learn how to use the assistive technology. So I've introduced myself to those people, and they've also helped me identify folks that I can work with.
Interesting.
And there's recruiting firms that will do it for you, but they're not always in your budget.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah, one of my favorite projects I worked on here recently was for a gaming console company, and we did an out of the box experience with a new gaming console. And so we purchased 10 of these new gaming consoles, and we shipped them to their house. And we used an app called D-Scout that's available for a mobile download. It's not cheap. I think it's about $5,000 to study. But essentially what I did was I asked these participants to have a family member, a friend, or a caregiver video record them taking it out of the box, connecting it to their TV, and getting it all going for the first time. And for a number of the different, in D-Scout, they call them missions, assignments that you give them to do. And the video was just so compelling. I mean, I had the way the flow worked. If you just sat there for 90 seconds and didn't touch anything, the screen reader would kick in. But if you touch something on the console or on the controller, then you had to wait till the very end of the flow, and then you got to choose the settings to turn the screen reader on.
Wow.
We found that one out. So I had a guy that had low vision that was literally like this far away from his TV monitor, and it took him 50 minutes to make it to that far, almost an hour. And it was so compelling. I basically had that as like a whole video clip. It's like you can't turn away from it because he really wants to play. He really wants to get into it. And then I had another guy who had he had a stroke a few years ago, and he lost the ability to use one of his hands. And so he had a third-party controller from a company in the UK that he was using for the earlier version of this gaming console. But the new gaming console, the third-party providers had come out with their new stuff to work with it. So he was literally holding the controller in his mouth to hold one of the buttons down. And his wife and kids were complaining. They're like, "We can't play the game after you're done." But again, the video of that, the visual of that was so compelling compared to, as you know, Deanne, I write amazing reports, but it couldn't hold a candle to what
Video.
what these people were coming back with. Yeah. So it was really compelling.
So what are some of the, and kind of, those are really good stories around kind of how compelling the visual can be. What are some of the recommendations, because you've talked about things that are out in production? What do you now deliver to a client in terms of those insights, and what recommendations you may have?
Oh, that's a great question, because it really depends on the audience. The hard reality is, in 90% of the cases, the fix that we're suggesting, whatever the recommendation is, it won't happen unless a developer writes code for it. So at some point, my beautiful slides will become Jira tickets out there in Agile land. And so if the audience includes not only my client, who might not be an IT professional, but works with our IT, I try to give them the same results in a tabular format, very similar to what Deanne taught me to do back in like 2004 when we worked for another big company. Because developers, they don't have the part of their brain to be able to read PowerPoint. It's just not there. They won't go through 30 slides. They need to see it short and sharp. They can have a discussion of, this is going to go into this sprint, that sprint, this goes in the backlog, Jira tickets are created. So yeah, I can create in that sense. And then also, if I work on an expert review, I partner with a developer that has an IT background, as well as WCAG. familiarity. And together we'll work on a spreadsheet that'll help spell out where things are working well, where things need to be improved, and along with some suggestions for how the code could be rewritten to make it compliant.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very popular document.
Oh, I'm sure.
Yeah. And do you work with many? So I know you are a UX researcher, but how have you ever mentored, like in some way, the younger UX professionals, the designers who may not have their eye on that ball? Um, any thoughts? What is it? What would you recommend to a new product designer or even new developer? But coming from that UX perspective, a lot of times things can be part of our own requirements. As we're doing designs, what do you recommend? To somebody
Oh,
coming in.
great question. If you can carve out 45 minutes to an hour, just pick one of your favorite websites that you like to go to all the time for news or shopping or whatever it might be, and either bring it up on your phone or bring it up on your computer and turn on the built-in screen reader. So on Windows, it's called Narrator. On the Mac, it's called VoiceOver. On both OS 10 and as well as iOS, it's called VoiceOver. On Android, it's called TalkBack. And what you'll find is that you can't use your mouse. You're cheating. It's keyboard only. And if you Google keyboard shortcuts for any one of those screen readers, a list will come up and you can try it out. And it's very enlightening what that experience is like to try to get through a website. You start to learn about that initial focus. If you're in a form, for example, sometimes the form fields aren't in order. They jump around.
Yeah.
So that can be super crazy. And then there's also a free plugin from a group called Wave. I think it's called WebAIM, and the plugin is called Wave, WAVE.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an extension in Chrome. It's also an extension in Firefox. And it will also highlight, it'll look at the code and highlight possible issues. It also has a nice color contrast layer to it as well, where you can start thinking, especially if you're a designer, start thinking about what colors need to be in the foreground and the background. They're going to be compliant versus non-compliant. So it's a good way to get a head start on that kind of stuff. Unless you like paying consultants,
Yeah.
which I'm not opposed to.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But those are good steps to try and get your feet wet.
Yeah, I like that one, making people do it, because going back to our experience, even with all of our decades of, being out there, being aware, considering, it was even watching someone go through it, let alone going through it myself. I think that's a great suggestion that you made.
And there's also a free course out there. Trying to find the name of it here for you.
While Richard's looking for that, if you have any questions, don't forget we have a few minutes left, so send your questions over.
The organization's called W3C. So W is in website, 3 is in the number 3, and C is in Charlie. If you look for them, they have a free training course. It takes about 6 to 8 hours to get through it. If you want to throw down $100, you can come out with a certificate if that means something to you. If it doesn't, you can just take the class for free. And it has a mix of videos as well as an online component. What I really like about it is particularly the videos in the first couple modules. They do a nice job of trying to get beyond just checklist compliance and introduce you to people that have disabilities and are using assistive technology. And they talk to you about what it's like to use the assistive technology and some of the things that they struggle with and some of the things that they enjoy. So it kind of humanizes the whole thing, because it's very easy, particularly when you're facing a lawsuit, to think, I have to check every box and get everything where it needs to be, which I totally get. You want to get out of the penalty box and tell the CEO or whomever that everything's cool, we got it. But if you can, take a deep breath and get beyond that and start thinking about, these are actual people out here that,
The empathy. Mm-hmm.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they're trying to get something done, and you can help them if reorder things or write the code in a different way or take a few extra steps.
Yeah. So this has been, oh my goodness, this has been so helpful.
Yes.
So just to kind of recap what we've heard, Richard, this requires your IT or your technical team's involvement to some extent, it sounds like. So whether your stakeholder is in development or outside of development, ultimately this is an effort that is implemented by your development team. And in order to effectively evaluate, you've got to consider what's in production. So wireframes are not an effective way to conduct this type of evaluation and not ideal. Use an expert to kind of dig deep, but you can do some of that work initially by using a built-in screen reader and just following along within your company's application to see how are things in terms of that benchmark, what CAG standard, WCAG, and how does your organization, your offerings align to that, and develop a plan. So recruit individuals with special needs if you can, but then develop a plan around how you're going to address these issues if you are or have the situation where you are dinged on your accessibility compliance. Did I miss anything? Anything else you'd like to leave the audience with?
Just if you work for a company, I would reach out and find out if there's already people that either have an interest in this or are already doing something that you can join alongside. I have been a full-time employee at bigger companies, and it's great to be able to share the load with people because this takes a lot of work. It takes different skill sets to be able to pull it off. And like I said, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel if someone's already halfway to where you need to be or is already doing something. Also, that W3C course that I mentioned a moment ago, toward the end of it for extra credit on a free course, they coach you on developing a plan of action for how to bring about accessibility practices inside your company. So it's very practical as well.
Excellent.
Awesome. Well, I am done. I feel like there's so much to digest and just think about in terms of what we consider in the work that we do. I think that this is something that's a key component of any UX researcher or designers. This should be a part of your toolkit to some extent. Richard, anything else you want to leave the audience with?
No, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or if there's any way that I can offer some help. I'm happy to chat with whomever. Looking forward to hearing from folks.
Awesome. And that's Richard Douglas with 2 S's. Richard
Yeah.
Douglas with 2 S's.
One of those Douglases, yes.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions, feel free to send them over. Richard's available from a consultative standpoint to answer those questions if you didn't get them in. Thank you so much again for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Yep.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Hope you have a great holiday.
Yeah.